The Truth About Little Bighorn 1976 Arapaho Warrior Waterman Story. 26 arrows were found embedded in a single soldier's body after the Battle of Little Bighorn. As the gun smoke cleared and silence fell over the battlefield, Arapaho Warrior Waterman stood witness to one of the most devastating defeats in U.S. military history. Subscribe to Native Legends and History Stories to experience authentic narratives from those who lived through defining moments in American history. What really happened during Custer's last stand? Through Waterman's eyes, discover the untold truth of how a young Arapaho warrior found himself reluctantly positioned at the center of a battle that would reshape the American frontier forever. Waterman was a young Arapaho warrior, just 22 years old, when the fateful Battle of Little Bighorn took place. When I was a young man, it was the custom of the young Indians to go on small war parties, looking for Shoshone or other unfriendly tribes. He later recalled following this tradition, Waterman joined for other Arapaho men named Yellow Eagle, Yellow Fly, well knowing one and left hand. As they departed from their settlement at Fort Robinson, the 5 warriors moved with purpose across the plains, their eyes constantly scanning the horizon for signs of potential enemies. Their mission was straightforward but dangerous: locate Shoshones or other hostile tribes, gather intelligence about their movements, and return with valuable information for their people. The small band traveled for several days, moving carefully through the territory. As they approached the Little Bighorn River, fate intervened one day near the Little Bighorn River. We met a small party of Sioux. Waterman recounted. The encounter seemed fortuitous at first, a chance meeting between allied tribes on the vast plains. The Sioux warriors greeted them with apparent friendliness. They told us that the Sioux were going to have a sun dance and said that we should come along with them to the Sioux village and have a good time afterward. The invitation to witness the sacred Sundance ceremony was significant, an honor not lightly extended to outsiders. Waterman and his companions agreed, unaware of the suspicion brewing beneath the surface of this cordial invitation. They followed the Sioux party toward their encampment, expecting to participate in sacred rituals and strengthen tribal bonds. As they approached the Sioux village, Waterman noticed a shift in atmosphere. The number of warriors around them multiplied rapidly. What had been a small, welcoming party transformed into a formidable force. As we came near the village, a great many Sioux came out of the camp to meet us. Waterman remembered. They took all our guns away and made us prisoners, saying that we were scouts of the white man and that they were going to kill us. The accusation struck like lightning. In those tense years of conflict with the U.S. Army, any suggestion of collaboration with white soldiers could mean death. The Sioux, preparing for what would become one of the largest gatherings of Plains Indians in recorded history, were particularly vigilant against spies. The 5 Arapaho warriors found themselves disarmed and surrounded by hostile faces. Their protests of innocence fell on deaf ears. That night we were guarded so we could not escape, Waterman said. They sat under heavy watch as darkness fell, uncertain if they would live to see the morning. Waterman later learned the full context of their predicament. Afterward, I learned that these Sioux thought we were scouts for the white soldiers. The suspicion wasn't entirely unreasonable. The U.S. Army frequently employed native scouts from tribes allied with the government, including some Arapaho. But for Waterman and his companions, the accusation was both false and potentially fatal. As they sat under guard that night, none of them could have imagined that their unexpected detour would place them at the scene of one of the most significant battles in American history, or that Waterman would witness the final moments of Lieutenant Colonel George Armstrong Custer. The morning after their capture, fortune shifted for Waterman and his companions when a prominent Cheyenne leader named T. Moon arrived at the camp and discovered the Arapaho prisoners. Recognizing the long-standing alliance between their peoples, T. Moon immediately intervened on their behalf. In the morning, T. Moon, chief of the Cheyenne, learned we were Arapaho. Waterman recalled the Cheyenne leader understood the gravity of the situation and acted swiftly. The relationship between these tribes ran deep. As Waterman explained, the Cheyenne and the Arapaho have always been brothers. T. Moon approached the Sioux leadership with authority and conviction. He negotiated firmly for the release of the 5 young Arapaho men, insisting they were not spies, but fellow warriors who deserved respect rather than suspicion. His status among the gathered tribes carried significant weight, and the Sioux leaders eventually relented. Moon went to the Sioux chiefs and made them give us back our guns and set us free, Waterman said. This intervention likely saved their lives, but their freedom came with limitations. The Sioux returned their weapons as promised, yet maintained a wary eye on the visitors. The Sioux gave us our guns, but they kept a close watch on us so we could not get away, Waterman noted. Though armed once again, they remained virtual captives, unable to leave the massive encampment. For the next 2 days, Waterman and his companions remained in the Sioux village. We remained in the Sioux camp and saw the sun rise twice, he later recounted during this time. Waterman observed the daily life of the camp, the preparations for the Sundance ceremony, and the constant influx of more warriors and families arriving from different directions. On the 3rd day, a remarkable event occurred. Then the whole village moved farther down the river and made another camp, Waterman said. The massive logistical operation unfolded before his eyes as thousands of teepees were dismantled, packed and transported downstream, where they were erected anew. Hundreds of families, thousands of horses, and all their possessions flowed like a human river to establish a new position along the Little Bighorn. What Waterman witnessed was extraordinary, even by the standards of someone familiar with tribal gatherings. The sheer scale of the assembled force left an indelible impression on the young warrior. It was the biggest camp I ever saw. He marveled there were thousands of warriors. I do not know how many. This was no ordinary tribal gathering. Waterman was observing the largest concentration of Native American fighting power assembled in the 19th century. Warriors from multiple Sioux bands, Northern Cheyenne and Arapaho, had united in response to increasing military pressure, and broken treaties. Their combined strength created an unprecedented alliance that would soon face its greatest test. The next morning marked the turning point in Waterman's unexpected journey when the sun came up again. That was the day of the fight, he recalled simply. Nothing in the early hours suggested the historical significance this day would hold, yet by nightfall, Waterman would become witness to one of the most debated military encounters in American history. The young Arapaho found himself drawn to higher ground as commotion spread through the massive encampment. Warriors mounted their horses, women gathered children, and an urgency electrified the air. Soldiers had been spotted approaching. Waterman, still under close watch, but curious about the unfolding events, made his way up a nearby hill. When I reached the top of the hill, I saw Custer, Waterman stated, using his pronunciation of the famous colonel's name. What he observed in those moments would later become crucial first-hand testimony of Custer's final minutes alive. He was dressed in buckskin coat and pants and was on his hands and knees. Waterman recounted he had been shot through the side, and there was blood coming from his mouth. This detailed description contradicts several romanticized accounts of Custer's death, showing instead a wounded commander struggling on the battlefield, rather than dying heroically with guns blazing. Even in his gravely wounded state, Custer remained alert to his surroundings. He seemed to be watching the Indians moving around him. Waterman noted, suggesting Custer maintained awareness until nearly the end. The colonel wasn't alone in his final moments, for soldiers were siding up around him, but they were all badly wounded. All the other soldiers were down. In these precise observations lies critical historical data. Waterman places Custer among the last soldiers fighting, confirming that most of his men have already fallen. The scene unfolded rapidly from this point. Then the Indians closed in around him, and I did not see any more. Waterman said the warriors, blocking his view of the colonel's final moments. The battle's aftermath revealed a sobering detail about how many soldiers died. Most of the dead soldiers had been killed by arrows, as they had arrows sticking in them. Waterman observed, this detail runs counter to popular depictions emphasizing gunfire, but aligns with archaeological evidence from the battlefield showing extensive use of traditional weapons alongside firearms. Waterman next encountered Custer's body after the fighting concluded. The next time I saw Custer, he was dead, and the Indians were taking his buckskin clothes. He stated matter-of-factly. The distinctive buckskin garments, which had made Custer recognizable even from a distance, became prized war trophies. The Indians were quarreling, each trying to take the clothes away from the other. I don't know who got them. The decisive battle ended relatively quickly. The fight was all over when the sun was there, about 3. Waterman recalled, using the sun's position to mark the time. This timing contradicts some historical accounts, suggesting a prolonged engagement, and supports modern assessments that Custer's defeat happened rapidly once fighting began with the soldiers defeated. Women from the camp crossed the river to collect items from the dead. The squaws then crossed the river and began taking the clothes off the dead soldiers. Waterman reported the battlefield still held dangerous and shocking moments sometimes. One that was not yet dead would move a little, and the squaws would become frightened and scatter. Waterman maintained a respectful distance from these activities. What the squaws did to the dead soldiers, I do not know because I did not go back and see, he stated. However, he acknowledged the practice of taking scalps. I saw many soldiers who were scalped, but I don't know if Custer was scalped or not, because I went back across the river to the camp after the fight was over. Waterman's account, with its precise details and clear chronology, provides rare eyewitness testimony of how the famous last stand actually unfolded. His observations, free from both the glorification of Custer, common in American accounts, and the triumphalism sometimes found in native tellings, offer a uniquely balanced perspective on the historic battle's pivotal moments. Long after the warriors dispersed and the bodies were buried, the battlefield at Little Bighorn continued to reveal its secrets. You see, after a battle that immense, there were weapons of all kinds laying all over the fields, Waterman explained. These remnants told their own stories of the conflict, preserving physical evidence of what occurred that fateful day. The variety of artifacts recovered paints a vivid picture of the battle's intensity. Perhaps most striking were 26 arrows, retrieved from the body of one of the troopers after the battle, a grim testament to the effective use of traditional weapons alongside firearms. Guns of various types were recovered over the decades following the conflict, including a Colt 45 single-action Army revolver found years later and a Springfield trapdoor carbine taken from a fallen soldier. Some artifacts remained in native possession for generations. The Springfield trapdoor carbine was taken from a dead trooper. It was in the Sioux warrior's family until the 1950s. Waterman noted another find came much later. This Colt 1860 model revolver was found in 1935, half buried in the river bank. No doubt this was dropped by a warrior, as the soldiers were using the newer Colt single-action Army. The battlefield itself changed over time. The Little Bighorn battlefield became a tourist attraction in the years after the battle. Many of the relics laying on the surface were taken back to homes across the states, Waterman observed. Early documentation shows this 1877 photograph shows horsebones on Last Stand Hill. Small timber stakes can be seen in the ground, the first markers of where a trooper fell. Remarkably, physical evidence continued to emerge decades later. Horse bones found on Last Stand Hill in the 1940s. The bones were found while digging a trench for a pipe, Waterman explained. Personal items also surfaced. Pen knives found on the battlefield, a trooper's boot found after the battle. The commemoration of the battle incorporated these physical remains. The monument was filled with horse bones found around the battlefield, creating a literal foundation of historical material. Items from both sides of the conflict were preserved, offering balanced insight into the famous confrontation. The remote location of the battlefield contributed to its preservation, but also meant that bones were left on the surface for over a year before they were buried. A stark reminder of the battle's harsh reality. Perhaps most poignant was the photograph taken in 1920 showing Stumthorne, an old Cheyenne warrior, holds a carbine he captured at the battle 44 years before. This image bridges the gap between the battle and modern times, showing how the memory lived on in the hands and hearts of those who participated. Waterman's detailed account offers a valuable perspective on one of American history's pivotal moments. His words cut through myth and legend, providing clarity about what actually happened. When Custer and his men met their end on the rolling hills beside the Little Bighorn, the story of Little Bighorn lives on, not just in history books, but in the physical artifacts and eyewitness accounts that continue to shape our understanding today. Waterman's observations recorded for posterity help us piece together the complex truth of this momentous clash between cultures. If you want to discover more authentic Native American perspectives on pivotal historical events, subscribe to Native Legends and History Stories. Our channel brings you stories that challenge conventional narratives and provide deeper understanding of America's complex past